Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paranormal Files Into the Darkness. I am your host, Sean Wagner. I am the director of the Central Pennsylvania Investigators and also one of the founders of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective. First of all, my co-host for tonight, we had a change due to bad weather, but instead of Gwen, filling in for the great Gwen Purcell is none other than Big Chuck Larson. How are you doing,
Sean.
Big Chuck?
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are things in Jersey?
I guess we're gonna get that storm that Gwen had. So if I disappear, you know what happened.
There's always a chance even I'll disappear because it was booming around here just a few minutes back.
Well, 'tis the season. So excited to be on the show. Thanks for asking.
All right.
Good.
All right. And also, this show is a super chat. So if you don't mind, please consider giving us a thumbs up and a share on YouTube and for Facebook. If you could share it and like it. Also, I forgot, but a subscribe would help us out as well on YouTube. Thank you. We appreciate it. If you have any questions on the way, please put them all in capital letters. All right. Go ahead, Brendan, for who's going to be on our future guests. That part. Our next show will be Thursday, April 14th, when we'll have on Nancy Duturtre. She is a skeptical psychic. April 28th, we'll have on Heather Taddy. She's from Paranormal State and Alien Highway. May 12th, we'll have on Dave Schrader. He's from the Holzer Files. And, of course, he has a new podcast, The Paranormal 60. May 26th, we'll have Katie Burr from Everyday Paranormal and Ghost Lab on. Also, since we have going to take a moment, people who are viewing us, please type in chat who you would like us to have on the schedule in the future. I not always able to do that, but I'm going to check out the comments right now, in fact. So please let me know who you would like us to have on, and I will try to get them on, who's obviously not already on the schedule.
Anyone say anything?
Not yet. All right. Well, we'll move on, and that maybe we'll try later on towards the end. All right. Now for the real introduction for tonight. You're in for a special trip. We have an author investigator who's been researching the paranormal for over 20 years. He's been on Ghost Hunters and all the episodes of Ghost Hunters International. He also writes about Irish myth, legends, and lore as well, with such books as The Influence, The Council of Three trilogy, In the Mist of Gods, Banshee, Searching the She, Legend Seekers, and The Deceptions of Gods and Men. Can you post the picture of the books, Brendan? For a moment, if you could. All right, we'll go over it one more time here. The Influence, The Council of Three trilogy, In the Mist of Gods, Banshee, Searching the She, Legend Seekers, and The Deceptions of Gods and Men, and The Complete Approach, a Scientific Metaphysical. He's also done some documentaries, including Whispers from Stone, Serpents, The Gatekeepers of the Old Knowledge, and The Space Brothers Deception, to name a few. That can be watched under his YouTube name, Barry Fitzgerald. His website is www.charmstealer, CHARMSTEALER.com. And his books can be purchased on Amazon or through charmstealer.com. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest, Barry Fitzgerald.
Good morning, folks, and thank you for the wonderful introduction there. That was very, very kind.
We try at Paranormal Files. Thank you for being great enough to come on with us. How are things going for you in Ireland?
Well, everything's great, and the weather has been absolutely amazing over the past 10 days or so. So if you wouldn't mind sending us some more very nice weather, we deeply appreciate it.
Well, we're going through the roller coaster type of time of year for us right now. So we can send you a little bit of everything.
No, you can keep that stuff. Keep that stuff. We had enough of that over winter. Now we'll take the good weather.
I don't blame you.
Got to get those flowers blooming.
And I know I'm certainly looking forward to spring and warmer weather all the time. That's for sure. Well, it's come that time. For everybody that works hard during the week, how about our toast? Go ahead and everyone, and those who are also watching out in the viewer world, thank you.
Water for me, but would you have a little Irish whiskey there, Barry? Would you have scotch?
Oh yeah. You know, obviously it goes with the territory.
Nice.
That's nice. Awesome. It definitely would. Well, how were things for you? How were your parents towards the paranormal when you were growing up?
Oh, well, I have to say that they weren't that happy about me following this particular path. But they've definitely come to terms with it now. That's for sure. You know, I can understand, though. My father has to take some responsibility because, you know, whenever I was growing up, in my early youth, in a haunted house, my father used to sit us down in front of the new color television to watch Star Trek, and Doctor Who, and other sci-fi shows. So that, of course, instilled a natural curiosity from my standpoint, of adventure and everything else. And so I think he has to take some responsibility for that. But you know, I laugh to myself whenever I think back in those days and consider that as a child I must have been an absolute ruffian, and he probably did that just to get me to shut the hell up. And I became mesmerized by Captain Kirk and everything else, and as you can see, sporting the old colors.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, so that of course, that fascination has lasted straight through right up until I just turned 50 there last week, and so it's still there.
So what kicked you off with the interest? I mean, did you lose someone close to you, or was there like a?
Well, I think Chuck, like most people that get involved, they have occurrences in their youth, and as I hinted there, you know, I grew up in a haunted house for some years, and although my parents never talked to us about it, they never ever discussed the history of the place in front of the children. I did have my experience. Now at the time, I never thought anything of it. It was Christmas Eve, and you know the old saying, not even a mouse stirred. But I was stirring because I needed to drink water. So I went to the foot of the stairs at the top of the landing and looked down, and there was a figure coming up the stairs. In the darkness, I saw it. Now, my initial instinct was, oh my God, this is Santa, I'm caught. So I immediately ran back to bed and forced myself to sleep. And the next morning woke up and the toys were there. And you know how it all runs out. But it was years later that I happened to be talking to my parents about this, about what I saw, because it stuck in my head. And they told me that house had a reputation, and my mum had seen that particular figure in the house. And I had been back to the house since, I have to say, because that house plagued my dreams. Now, in my waking times within the house, I do not remember any bad experiences that I had. Yet in my dreams, right up until maybe 15 years ago, I was plagued by terrible nightmares of that house. And it was only when the house was destroyed, it was finally knocked down, that the dream stopped. But I have to say, I was back at the house, and I got permission to investigate, and I went in, and sure enough, the phenomena started in the kitchen and made its way up the stairs, and we were able to track it as it made its way up the stairs and into the main bedroom. And it was a curious nature, almost, I suppose, like a replay. So possibly not an intelligence per se, but something triggered off my a deep-seated fear of that house, and more so what was in it, because the dream itself seemed to suggest that although I was trying to express to people who had moved into the property to beware, because at some level I knew what was in the house, but I couldn't exactly remember what it was, but I knew that it was bad. So that plagued me until the house was destroyed finally.
Now, was that house in your family for a while, or did your parents just buy it, or was it like, you
No,
know?
they just rented. They just rented, and,
Oh, really?
it was there for we were there for 3 years,
Hmm.
and so and then we moved on.
Oh, okay.
But it certainly left its impression, let's say.
I see that.
Definitely see where it would. Yeah. Um, any advice you have for someone starting out?
For somebody starting out in this field of research, I would definitely say read. Get as much information as you can, because knowledge is power. And no matter what you do, you will be open to this idea of using a voice recorder or using some sort of device to try and make contact with those beyond the veil. Now, be aware and be advised that what you're about to do is, for all intents and purposes, and you can call it for what you want, but it's an esoteric practice, it's an occult practice in which you are calling forward to that on the other side. So when you lift your voice recorder and you say, is there anyone there? Can you come forward and give me your name? That is the initiation of that particular occult practice. And that practice in itself is hundreds, if not thousands of years old. But what I would instill in people who are going out to begin is that there is an intent behind that wish to open the doorway, to communicate. Please instill that intent when you finish with your communication. Close the door. Do not leave the damn door open. That is a mistake that many have made, and that has led us into a situation where we are today. And that in itself causes innumerable damage by not closing that door again.
Wow.
And in the paranormal world, you truly never know what you're dealing with.
And that's it, and we end up, we have groups that go into a property and they try and attempt to make communication and possibly are able to open that doorway. But although nothing may come through, they think, oh, well, there's nothing here, and they leave. Now, there may be nothing that night, but 2 days later, or 2 weeks, or 2 months, something may come through. And that is a problem because the door is left wide open.
That's a good point. Yeah. Can I ask how you ended up on Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International?
Well, GH were coming across to Ireland to film, and it turned out it was some of their highest rated shows when they came, and they came, of course, to Let Kessel, and it was a friend of mine in Washington D.C. was asked by the GH team, did they know anyone in Ireland that could help them out? So they put my name forward, and so whenever the guys arrived, I met them, and everything was great. They said they're down one man. Would I consider going on screen rather than being someone in the background? And I thought, oh yeah, that's fine. So that was it. That's how I got onto GH, and then there were months later. After that, I got a phone call from Los Angeles to say that they're doing an international show, and would I consider being part of it? And I thought, well, yeah, let's do that, and travel the world and get interaction and meet people of different cultures and spirituality and see the differences within the phenomena, and also the similarities, which was very important, which is, of course, helped to publish the latest book, The Deceptions of Gods and Men. which shows this thread, this common thread that weaves through many of the research fields, the fringe research fields. There's a distinct commonality between all of the phenomena. And in the last 30, 40 years, we have been driven to pigeonhole our various different terms of phenomena. And I think that was a grave mistake, because by doing that, we refuse to exceed the other similar, if not identical, phenomena that was being repeated within cryptozoology, within ufology, and things like that, because we were all pigeonholing and we were protecting our little area. But that's changing. I'm very, very happy to see that this is changing now, and we're seeing this common factor roll through many of the fringe fields, research fields. And so, as I said, it's great that we're now starting to work together. We're now starting to speak, and see, okay, if we strip away this term, what are we left with? And that was one thing that I wanted to do within the latest publication, was to strip away the mask. And because the mask in itself, part of that mask is derived from us. It's what we perceived that to be, and how we thought it should be. But also it's a mask in which there was a high level of deception was used by these things coming through the veil, in order that we couldn't track them. And that mask in itself has really hindered us. But if we remove the mask, we can track it by the phenomena in which it interacts with us on all the different fringe fields. And that we can track back. In fact, I've been tracking this information back into the earliest written word, the cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia. So we're able to track it all the way back to there. Now, it goes much, much further than that, of course. It goes way back into the dark areas of our history. But we don't have the written language for that. So we can go back around 3,400 or 5,000 BC. But that's about it. We lose track of it then, because everything was verbalized. It was an oral tradition. So, and the problem with oral traditions, as we saw in the likes of Wales in the UK, the Druids didn't like anything written down. To them, it was an abomination. They used oral traditions all the time, and you were schooled in how you could relay the oral traditions. And if you couldn't relay the stories properly, then you were kicked out. But the problem is that when the likes of the Saxons and things came to England, they pushed and forced the Celts back into Anglesey and back onto that headland in Wales, and they were massacred. And with that, the history of the Celts vanished. And that's what we see time and time again, is that the history that we had with these things, that we're able to track them with, because it was an oral tradition, it's easier to get rid of that identity and that history, if the oral traditions are being wiped out.
Wow, that was pretty deep.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. 1 second here.
Do you have something from the questions or whatever?
Well, no, I was going to ask you, growing up in Ireland, what do you think of, like, the United, since the United States has only been around like 300 years,
Mhm.
How do you compare, like, our hauntings to your hauntings? Since like you said, you're going back 3,000 or 4,000 years, and there's, you've lost, information. What's your take of the United States? Have you ever been over here to investigate, or?
Oh yeah, man, many times I've been across the US. But although the United States has only been recognized for around that particular time period, you have a history that's there that goes back thousands of years. irrelevant of who's experiencing it, you do have a history of the land. And if you look at the mound builders, for instance, in your neck of the woods, those are the same mound builders that were building our mounds. The same builders that were having communications and connections with this serpent aspect that we were having, you were also having on the lands of America. So there is a history there, and it goes back thousands of years. It's just how we tap into it. The problem is when we live in a new country with an influx of people, the importance of the history of a land can be easily eradicated and built over and bulldozed. And that is a problem. That's something that possibly you may need to look at. The likes of the old buildings are quickly torn down for a new building that meets better codes and everything else. That in itself destroys the history of the 300 years that we're talking about there. You're completely eradicating that and just leaving little tiny pockets. For here in Ireland, I can go to passage chambers that were built by the people that came from Mesopotamia before the Great Pyramids of Giza. Now, I can go and visit those 24/7, 365 days a year. And there's no one there to bother me. I can have my interaction with these things that are coming through and experience the sun as it enters at certain times of the year for these ceremonies to begin. But I think as a land gets older and it develops and the people develop with the land, there's a possibility that a lot of the history that hasn't been bulldozed will be kept, and of course will be enveloped into the growing nation, and hopefully that's the way it'll go. Provided we don't kill each other. That's another problem which we seem to have.
Always a problem.
Definitely.
So you mentioned being by yourself and doing your investigations.
Yes.
How was it like? What was it like working with a big, production with like a major network and camera crews and catering? And I mean, were you able to accomplish stuff? Does it get a lot of distractions, or you're able to,
I have to say
successful
that
investigations?
during the daytime, we would of course meet all the shots that are required from the production team. So the daytime driving, the interviews, all of that would all be laid out, and we would have our meetings with the directors and things and the producers, and we would say, okay, what is it you need? Where do we need to go for this? And things like that. So we would have everything laid out, and we would go and do that. Now that in itself is what they need. But when it came to us, and in particular the night shots, the investigations, when we went lights out, that's whenever the crew came to us and asked, okay, what do we need to do here? And they were relying on us to relate, okay, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to do it. So there was a great balance I found between cast and crew, and I think that was valued. And in fact, one of my cameramen, his name was Steve Robinson, aka Snapper, an absolute gentleman, I have to say, and God rest his soul. But when he was filming with me, he knew, he could feel the atmosphere change when he was working with me, and he knew that I hated extra light in the environment, and when he felt the environment change, he knew that I was doing my work. I was doing what I was there to do. When he sensed that, he closed over the viewfinder and the camera and gave me the darkness that I required, without me having to say anything or indicate anything whatsoever. He just sensed it, and it closed over, and we went to work. And that in itself was absolutely splendid. And as I say, we lost Steve a few years back, but Before the show ended, I had went down to Asia, because I was trying to follow up on cases there, um, in Hong Kong and places like that, the suicide tunnels, and I wanted us to be the first time to be diving on wrecks in Hong Kong,
Oh,
uh, as a team to investigate the wrecks there and the suicide tunnels at the same time. I also wanted us to go to the end of the Great Wall of China, where there's a great fortress there. But the fortress was one thing, but the one thing that intrigued me more so than anything were the voices that people were hearing out in the desert, that were luring people out from the fortress into the desert, and they were vanishing, never coming back. So by the time we reached that stage, we were starting to break free from this cookie cutter format that we tend to see time and time again. And we were really starting to really push the boat out, but unfortunately, it was too late. And if we were to go ahead with that particular expedition that I wanted to push us on, we were really going to push the team to their breaking limit, because we needed divers, we needed people to go through diving school and everything else to do this. This was not going to be an easy task, but it was something that I felt we needed to do. We needed to continually change and adapt. And my big thing with the equipment, was this adaptation. It was a strange thing. It was the adaptation of the same piece of equipment was being remodeled but given extra lights. So we were learning nothing from this. It was the same rubbish that was being pumped out, and investigative teams were using these things to investigate, but we learned nothing from that. Okay, if a spirit comes near this device, it'll change colors. Okay, but what do we know from what do we learn from that? Absolutely nothing. So this was a big drive of mine to really push the equipment, the adaptation of the equipment, and also understand the equipment, and how it worked. So this again was another big drive to try and develop that. And thankfully, I have to say I am working with an engineer in Germany at the moment, and we're developing technology which is way beyond anything I have seen before, because we have now isolated a particular frequency that we find within not only the haunted sites, we also find it in sites belonging to ufology, into cryptozoology, and all the other fringe research sites. So now we're wanting to target these specific frequencies, which are way below anything of what we normally use within the paranormal, to investigate. So there is development still going ahead. We are still working diligently at trying to improve this, along with writing books and everything else, because to me it's important to give back to the community. The community supported me through GHI, and I will never ever forget that. And I've always wanted to give back to the community. This is what I've found. This may be useful, and put it into the books that they can have and say, okay, right, if we do this, how can we alter that? How can we improve on this? So that's what I do, and that's what I hope to do until my last breath.
Well, that's really good. Again, a reminder, our guest is Barry Fitzgerald of Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International. If you have any questions for Barry, please put them in all capital letters. It'll make it easier for Brendan, who's running the board behind us. Also, if you're enjoying the show, please consider helping us out by liking and sharing, or by thumbs up, subscribing, and sharing as well. That would all be great and help us out immensely. Thank you. Can you elaborate more, Barry, on the frequency thing, the low frequency? I think it's a low frequency.
Not at the moment. It's all hush hush at the moment, because I have an expedition that's going to go ahead this summer, and we are not only are we after on very unusual cryptids, but we're also after a portal that UFOs have been active right up until the last few months. So we're and it is heavily science based expedition. So, and I know that we're going to be using the equipment, the designed equipment for that in particular. So that's all I can say at this moment in time. But there will be more reports coming out later in the year.
Awesome, and I guess we'll have to have you on down the road to get the answers for that one. Then,
Couple
Well,
more
also-
quick questions. Have you ever messed with the cameraman when you're on the show?
Oh my
Like-
God, absolutely. Yeah, I
Yep,
was
okay.
forever. If there was ever a joke to be played, I was always at it. I can remember Snapper. He said to me in Paris one day. He said, "So what are you going to do in Paris on your day off?" And I said, "Well, I have to take a submarine out into the English Channel where I have to meet a guy on a ship, and if he doesn't pay up, we'll sink him." And of course, Snapper, he laughed and he says, "Yeah, if you do that, bring me back proof, and I'll give you €200." And we made the deal, and off we went. And by the time we returned to the hotel with Mr. Perry and Mr. Chin, he says, "Well, where's your proof?" And I took the camera out and I showed him that I was leaning on a periscope, and Mr. Perry was loading a torpedo, and Mr. Chin was in the engine room. Little did I know that I knew that there was a submarine a museum within Paris, and of course we straight there and took a photograph.
That's awesome. That's really
I never took his money, but we did have a good laugh about it. But yes, we always did like to play. Always did like to play jokes. I can remember Paul Bradford. He always fell asleep in the car. The motion of the car seemed to make him fall asleep very easily. And unfortunately, whenever I'm driving and I've got a Sharpie at my hand, that doesn't go too well. And so by the time we reached the hotel, I believe it was in Sweden, Paul was pretty quick out of the car because he was refreshed from his long sleep, and ran up to the front desk. Now, this hotel lobby, a very posh hotel, had had lots of people in it who were giving him very unusual looks. Now, not only did he have a male appendage drawn on his face, he had dots all over his face and everything else. So he knew nothing of this, and of course the hotel staff were booking him in, giving him strange looks and everything else. And it was only when the elevator doors closed, the reflected surface, he was able to see what they were seeing. So yes, we did have lots of fun, and so we did laugh loads. Yeah.
So, would you have done anything different if you produced the Ghost Hunters International show, or do you have any regrets from that show? Or
yes, I would have done things differently. In regards, it was important that we were there to let people see that we were hunting the paranormal and trying to do what we do. But I felt we lost an aspect of the show, because when you're going into countries and there are kids walking the streets with AK-47s, or our equipment is being held up in some South American country for wanting to get very unusual payments before they release the equipment and stuff like that. There were experiences on the road that I felt we really should have brought into the show itself to show exactly what we were going through. For people to be attacked before we arrived on set with machetes. Why did we not tackle this? Why did we not show this? This is what the people have to go through here, and this is what we're threatened with as well. And the fact that we drive through parts of Brazil, nose to nose, because of the threat of drug lords and things like that. We should be showing this. The world is not a happy place. I felt that we were continually trying to put icing on a wound, and I didn't think that was appropriate. I thought we should show the world for what it is, and of course do the paranormal investigating as well. I thought we missed a trick with that. Sorry.
I can certainly agree with that, because that I never knew that myself. You just mentioned that there were lords in Brazil, for example. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And this idea that we had to travel long periods to get to various different locations. Um, you had your problems, and there were problems that you had to work through. And that's all part and parcel of traveling the world. The world can, of course, be a beautiful place, and to see people smile and everything else was absolutely amazing. But also to walk along beaches that you're afraid that there could be a syringe at anywhere in among all the rubbish that was washing up. That should have been something that we should have been tackling and looking at and reporting at as well. Um, but that's the way it is. That's the only thing I would have necessarily have changed. I would have liked a cast, probably possibly that were able to had a little bit more longevity. But I understood, the pressures of the travel, of being away for so long and away from your family, takes its toll. So I understood why people there was a revolving door on many of the cast, and that was unfortunate, but it was the way life is.
Definitely. Did you ever have security with you then on some of these places?
I'm trying to remember. I believe yes. I remember I was off. I arrived in Peru before the cast. I think I was there about a week before the cast, and so I was off. I took the opportunity to go to Nazca and go UFO hunting. I remember I had security there, um, and Peru can be a dangerous place, of course. And I've been back in Peru since. In fact, I was investigating the three-fingered mummies of Peru. I think I have one of their hands there. Um, and they were believed to be discovered in the desert of Nazca, and there was this drive to say that they were from an alien planet, and they had three fingers on each hand and three toes in the feet and things like that. And there was tall ones and there were small ones. There was a lot of money racked up in it, that's for sure. They wanted 100,000 each for the small mummies, and they wanted 1 million for the big one. And there was quite a production line that we discovered, where was pumping these things out. They weren't from another planet. They were definitely from this one, though, made up of various different parts that we exposed.
Wow. Do you ever run into any problems with customs? Like people think you're sneaking stuff out or sneaking stuff in?
The only time that we had problem with customs is when we're trying to get the equipment into the country. When you're using infrared, various different pieces of equipment and sound equipment and everything else, of course, it can raise red flags.
Sure.
But just at times there were countries that seemed to go out of their way to seize the equipment. And the only way you could get the equipment out, of course, was to
Pay.
line the palm with some silver. Seems to eradicate some of the problems.
So did you run into a lot of delays, production delays then, or?
Oh my goodness, yes, I can remember one time we had a week off in South America, and the cast, they knew that I was up to something, and when we had some downtime, and when they found out what I was doing, they all wanted to go. So I was heading up a live volcano and was intending to sandboard down the outside of it. And at the top, we got a phone call from Los Angeles to tell us, "What are you doing? You're not covered with the insurance." But we did it anyway. And we always tried to make the most of our time, and when we had our days off, we were off doing something. We were meeting people, or we were experiencing something. And we tried to make the most of it. We knew it wasn't going to last forever, so we definitely tried to make the most of it.
Wow.
That makes sense. You certainly have to take advantage of it while you can.
Oh, absolutely. I remember one person said to me, "What's one of your memorable moments?" And I said it wasn't while I was on the camera. we had to go back to a location to do some filming, and it was at the Mayan ruins in Central America, and we ended up going back there, and the cast stayed at the hotel. I was there with the crew, and I looked at this massive temple in the desert, or the jungle, and I climbed the steps and went up to the top of the temple and lay down and just looked at the stars above my head. And it was absolutely fascinating to make that connection, to say this is what they did. And the moon, I remember the moon coming up over the top of the jungle canopy. It was just one of those moments that was once in a lifetime. And I said, wow, I'll never ever get to do this or see this again. So I took that opportunity and just lived in that moment.
Have you stayed in touch with Rob Damaris?
I haven't heard from Rob now in quite some time, and I have to say I do often hear from Mr. Perry, Joe Chin, of course. I hear from him quite often. The girls, I haven't heard from the girls too often. I know Susie's at doing shows there in Los Angeles. And Paul Bradford, he's across actually in Ireland next month, or this month, in fact, 1st of April. So we're myself and my wife are heading up to spend some time with Paul when he's here with his wife.
Nice. That's tomorrow, 1st of April.
1st of April, yeah. Well, as in Ireland, we're in it already.
Yeah. That's awesome. Go ahead, Brendan, with the question. Demons, ghosts, evil ones, evil spirits can harm you, attack you. How do you defend yourself against such a threat?
Now,
thank you, Marcia.
Read that again.
Demons, ghosts, evil ones, evil spirits can harm you, attack you. How do you defend yourself against such a threat?
There's a very easy one for that in itself. And the answer to that comes from our ancient manuscripts. It's iron. An iron amulet is absolutely perfect. Again, what I was indicating during the chat initially is that there's a common thread that weaves through everything. Now, when we look at UFOs, the encounters that people have with aliens and the UFOs, again, this is just a mask. Earth spirits, fairies, jinn, old gods, they all absolutely hate iron, a common factor. And not a lot of people in ufology are aware that the Greys are absolutely terrified of people who wear iron. Now, when we go back and we look at the old texts, we can see that for someone who was wary of someone who was casting the evil eye, which in itself is just is a manipulation of their soul to hinder another soul. That particular type of witchcraft is well known and practiced within the likes of Romania and Transylvania. But an iron pin in the cuff was always noted to wear that off. To protect children from the fairy, you put iron pokers across the crib. And to protect your animals from the fairy, from mutilations, you put iron over the barn. So iron was always that particular factor that always seemed to appear. And it's interesting when we go back and we look at the likes of the incubus and succubus attacks. Again, it's another mask of the same phenomena. They will not attack. 9 times out of 10, they attack women more so than men, but they attack when the women enter the monthly cycle, when many go anemic. So the iron levels drop, they plummet, and that's when these things attack. They wait until then.
Oh, wow.
That's something. Yeah, I never knew any of that.
Ah, well, now you've come to the right place.
Wow.
We certainly have. What's the favorite place you've ever investigated?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know. I've had many places that I've investigated. Many have creeped me out. The likes of Wolfschanze, Hitler's Eastern Command Post in Poland, is just a warren of huge concrete bunkers, and that place creeped me out. But it was one of those places that I truly believe that we had. That's as close as we were ever going to come to Hitler. And then you have the likes of Panary Castle in Transylvania was another unique place, not because of what happened during the investigation, it's what happened a decade after the investigation. That's what amazed me more so than anything with that. I'll come back to that possibly later, but and then there was places in the Americas, Argentina, were other fantastic locations there as well. Yeah, there are many different places. They all had their own unique perspectives and things. Italy, there was a beautiful mountaintop fortress in Italy, which was just truly remarkable. The views from up there were stunning. But the activity was also fantastic. I remember the stones being thrown at Susie and Paul Bradford when they were investigating there. And yeah, it was. There are many different places, but again, they all have their own merits. If you like, there have been some bums of places too, and of course, we'll not go into those.
Can you talk about one of the places, if you could, please?
The bums of places, you mean?
Or well, any of the places where you talk about Hitler's bunker, or
well, I remember we went to Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
And we all traveled down there. And now, bear in mind, when you're going to shoot internationally, there is a vast amount of money that is expelled to make that show happen. And when you've got 17 cast and crew flying from all over the world to get to Singapore, that's not cheap. Never mind the 4-star hotel that you're being put up in as well. But we ended up flying down there to investigate the old Ford factory. And when we arrived, we found out that the Ford factory had been knocked down several years before. So it wasn't there. So we got a week in Singapore and with nothing to do. So that was one of those bummed sites where we just got a bit of a pet vacation, if you like. But the Wolfschanze in itself stands out there because I'm an avid nighttime photographer, and I love photographing the stars and things like that. And I usually during filming, I would have thrown the camera over my shoulder and headed off into the darkness of a place just to get the different shots overlooking valleys and stuff like that. But this place, of course, had an amazing railway track where Hitler's train would have brought him right into the heart of the complex.
Oh, wow.
And Hitler's bunker was there. But when, at that particular time of the night, there was no one else around, I threw the camera over my shoulder and said, right, I'll see you later. I got through the gates and I got about 10 feet. And I sensed it and I said, nope, I'm done. And I turned and walked back out again.
That's that's real quick question, off subject. Then maybe you can talk about that what happened to that at that castle a decade later. But what's your favorite legend in North America, or mystery or legend in North America?
Oh, I have to say, and this one still fascinates me. Up in, I believe it's New Hampshire. I think it's New Hampshire. You have the American Stonehenge. That place fascinates me because of what, looking at my work now and understanding it better. I'm fascinated by its history and lack of history. In fact, there's a lot of assumption made with the place. But I can remember going there and it was in winter. And there was a fence that circles the place. And it was myself and Chris Williams were there. Chris was off doing her thing, and I was left going through the various different stone structures and things like that. But I happened to notice that there was a lot of nuts on the ground. And I remember thinking to myself, that's odd that the animals haven't come to lift that. And then I happened to notice, wait a minute, why am I not hearing any animals? All the activity was outside the fence. It wasn't inside. And that caused a lot of curiosity from my standpoint. What was going on here? And whenever a lot of the work that I released in the Deceptions of Gods and Men, I got to look at some of these areas in which sacrifice had taken place. And a huge amount of our ancestral sites tended to appear that were connected to sacrificial worship were appeared in negative magnetic anomalies. And it's just interesting that that particular place appears in a negative magnetic anomaly. So I wonder what was happening there back in the day that is now lost to the mainstream, because I'm sure that there are still people there that understand what was happening there back at that time. So yeah, that particular place really amazes me. And back in 2019, I was across in Utah at Skinwalker Ranch, investigating that with some of the guys there. And I just got back to Ireland just before we were hit by the damn pandemic and everything else. Yeah, I have to say the United States amazes me with the different landscapes that you possess, and the strange disappearances. I have to say that David Paulides released a series of books, Missing 411. Yeah. Absolutely fascinating, because David's work also crosses over into mine. And it was interesting that David's work, that he says that there were clusters of people that disappeared in the national parks. They all disappeared in positive magnetic anomalies, where we were seeing the phenomena initially appear as well. And the work that I was doing here, the work here, we tended to see that a lot of the stuff was connected with stone. And strangely enough, David Paulides has also commented that a lot of people who disappeared went missing in boulder fields. So again, we're back to the stone. What's going on with the stone? So that caused a lot of curiosity, and there's continual work going on there at the moment. But yeah, we tend to find a lot of the activity around stone for some bizarre reason.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I had never even heard of a possible American Stonehenge. That's a surprise to me.
It's up there. I think it's New England or New Hampshire or somewhere around the north.
Yeah, it lines up with the real Stonehenge, doesn't it? Like if they.
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know about that.
If you took a line from the American Stonehenge and went straight across the ocean, it actually hit the original, the other Stonehenge.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great now that the American history now is being challenged because of science and things like that. It's challenging the history of what we're being taught in schools. The likes of oh my goodness, I've forgotten his name now. The Portuguese guy or Spanish guy that went across and Columbus. That he wasn't the first person to find the Americas. There were people there way before that. So I think that in itself is great to see that particular history is being challenged. And certainly the work that I'm doing here, I can see that a lot of the people who were taking types of technology and spirituality and things like that, and moving from the Fertile Crescent, moving across initially Northern Europe and down through almost like a cyclone, but also followed westward, followed the sun. And we find the same building styles also in the Americas that we're finding here, and also through Europe and into Africa and back into the Middle East. And this idea of In the Mayan culture, for instance, they've got this depictions of these gods with huge handbags, and it's like a handbag style thing. We're wondering what the hell is this about the handbag, or the basket. What is this about? The basket is actually a receptacle of the soul, and it's an image to say that the gods hold the souls. And I just happened to find that out this year when I came across a temple in the Mediterranean that is carved the same as the basket. I said, "Wait a minute, that's it." So it was a real wonderful find to have. I was able to piece a lot of the stuff together that had been lost for a long time.
Cool. Did you want to speak on the Romanian or the decade after?
Well, going into the investigation the night before, I had this very weird visionary experience. Now I don't take anything. It just sometimes this thing happens, and all of a sudden I was confronted by this woman on the back of two lions, standing on two lions. And I thought, what the hell is this about? She was furious that we were going to Dracula's castle. I didn't know what was going on or anything about it, and left it alone. But that following night, we were at the castle and we tried everything to reach Vlad, and we couldn't get anything. Not a whisper. But the moment that I switched it to this woman who was depicted on the back of the two lions, suddenly I got a Class A EVP that said, "Leave now." Oof. And I thought, wow, what on earth is this about? Now, I couldn't go to the crew and say, "This is what's happened." I just had to let it go. Because it was a one-off, and GHI certainly wasn't about the whole psychic and strange things. So we never touched that. But it was years later that I find that this particular woman has origins again also back to Babylon. You see, the ringed serpent that we were told was the order of the dragon that Vlad's father was connected with, that fought for Christendom, was also a Babylonian symbol for the serpent worship. And with the serpent worship, there was a high level of sacrifice that was being made. But this woman who was standing on the back of two lions was Astarte, the goddess, the Babylonian goddess of war. And I had no idea who the hell this was until a decade later. So it was a great confirmation. And of course, I was left wondering to myself, what on earth were Vlad and his father and all the hierarchy of the elites right up the east coast or the east side of Europe, what were they all mixed up with? And what was going on? Because this in itself, we have to remember, is thousands of years old. Like present day Christianity is only 2,000 years old. This is something that goes back 4,000, 5,000 years. So it really raised a lot of questions from that particular time period. But it did show me that they were in connection with something. And Vlad himself was held by the Sultan. So he did have access to that area. But what I'm saying is that this was already instilled before Vlad was given over along with his brother Radu to the Sultan as payment and security, so that his father wouldn't invade the Ottoman Empire again.
Wow. All right. We didn't talk too much about. Would you like to talk a little bit about maybe your most recent book, The Deception of the Gods and Men, a little bit more?
Yeah, The Deception of the Gods and Men is a look at what's behind the veil. how it appears to us, how it interacts with us, and the high level of deception in which it uses to cover its tracks. So no matter whether you're involved with the paranormal, ufology, and all the rest, when we start breaking this down and looking at it at the way that it interacts with us, we start realizing that, wait a minute, we're actually dealing with the same thing. And it's where that originates from, and how it deceives us. A lot of the information that we garner and put into the book, from both myself and my co-author Brian Allen from Scotland, we have pulled from a lot of the ancient manuscripts, and it really was a shocker from our standpoint. And I had no idea that the book was going to go the way that it has gone, and it's receiving amazing reviews, because it really does tie everything together. It was always there in front of us, but we just didn't seem to see it. And for instance, if we look at this idea of ufology, earth spirits, the jinn, the old gods, we all find the same phenomena within it, like the missing time, mischievousness nature of the interaction, abduction, mutilations, the high level of deception. It is all there, but there's another key point that we have to recognize through it all, is that all of them can be summoned through occult practices, which can be very, very minute in their own essence, but nevertheless occult and esoteric occult practice nonetheless. They can be summoned. And we think, well, UFOs are nuts and bolts. Well, so is the hand that appears in the seance rooms, that when you follow the arm up, there's no shoulder. There is nothing there after that, but the arm is solid. And another thing, that within the seance rooms, you've got this there is footage there of greys that appear within the seance rooms. What the hell's a grey alien appearing in a seance room? That's not the place for him. That's what we thought. So the book itself exposes that. It exposes the nature of those things behind it and how we should be challenging it. What we discovered is that when you become suspicious, and this is something that's very, very important, because you have to challenge what's coming through. But when you challenge it, it more than less will hightail it out of there. And if at any time during the communication it gives you a lie, you can be sure that is not to be depended on. Get rid of it. If it's going to lie to you once, it'll lie to you again. And that level of deception should not be worked with. Not at all. Now, there are good interactions, don't get me wrong. But the nature of the phenomena is that the negatives can get through to us quicker than the positives. So, and because we live in a nature now, in society, everything has to be quick. Everything, we have to have it now. We don't give it time. We don't work with it anymore. And that is leaving serious problems. Because within that, when those doors are left open, that's where you start to draw your attachments. And when that energy gets into a group, it will destroy it from the inside out. And we wonder why groups appear and disappear just as quickly as they came. Because they didn't understand the threat of the phenomena they were going out after.
It may seem, I know we always do prayers both before and after any kind of investigation.
A prayer to who?
We do a prayer to, I do a prayer mostly to Jesus Christ now, and God, yes.
Mm. A lot of people will draw in angels. And of course, angelology is a big thing. You know, there's huge amounts of tarot cards and everything else, of protective angels and everything else. But angels didn't exist before 584 BC. So what is it we're calling in? The angels of what we know today were former Babylonian planetary gods. So we need to be careful about what we're calling in. We need to understand the nature of what it is we're calling in. So that's why it's always important to challenge. to challenge it. And don't take the first thing that comes along. Do not take it at face value.
Wow.
So there's only been stories of, sorry, Chuck, of angels since like 4 BC. You said, or something?
584 BC. They didn't exist before then.
Okay.
So what's your opinion on heaven? You know, since with the whole paranormal thing. I mean, do you believe there is a heaven, or
the idea that we have, what we have is a religion that has taken aspects of various different cultures and faiths and everything else and patched it together, and as many do, and melded it and formed it into what we know it is today. This idea of heaven, of course, can also be found in the old traditions in the northern counties or the northern countries of Scandinavia, in which, and these are pre-Christian, I might add. So these ideas of where when you die, you end up going through this beautiful gate system, and across this bridge and in through this gate. And of course, which we would recognize today, and into this great green valley of beautiful flowers and trees and everything else, and everything's all light and airy, and there's people there on the other side to meet us, and everybody's happy and all the rest. But that in itself is not the end game. That is just it. They recognized it as it was like a bus stop, where you went to, and then you found out where you had to go next. So you were channeled off to another particular location. That in itself, of course, we would see this idea of many reports from outer body experiences and things like that, where people are coming back saying, "Oh, I seen heaven," and because that's what we associate heaven to be. But do you know what that was called back in the day before Christianity got the hold of it?
I can't say I do.
I don't know.
It was known as hell.
Oh, wow.
And hell in itself was not a bad place. And it was ruled over by a goddess called Hela. And that was a place that you went to. You had your stop, you had your rest, and then off you went to where you needed to be.
Oh, wow.
But within Christianity and modern religion today, that got infused with the Greek aspect of Hades and that belief, and the dark carnivorous place, yeah, you know what I'm trying to say, the caves, and the fires and the pits of hell and everything else that all came from there, and that got mixed up within that. And of course, why do we not want to go there? Because of fear. And a lot of fear is enthused within humanity to keep us in line, to keep us controlled, and don't do anything wrong or you'll go to hell. So that was one of those things, unfortunately. But do I believe in heaven? I would hope so. I would hope. Well, not necessarily the namesake, but I would like to think that there is something there beyond, that I will find some rest. But do I believe that we communicate with spirit? No, I don't. And this is where it gets very, very complicated. I explain it in the book, because within the modern age, we use the terminology soul and spirit, and it's very interchangeable. That's not the case, because soul is very different. That aspect that rests within us is a different nature to the spirit that rests inside us. So in itself, the body, the spirit, and the soul forms a trinity. And when the spirit dies, boom, it goes off and it travels to that particular location that we talked about, and then it's off, it's gone. We never have communication with that. That's gone. That was here for the experience, and it's returning back to the source, Belvedere, heaven, call it what you want. It returns back to there. We do not have communication with that again. What we do have communication with is the soul. The soul is the element that lingers. That's the thing that lingers after the body dies. And that's what we have communication with. And that, in part, is what's coming back through the void. And reasons for that, of course, are explained in the book. And the soul itself, the soul's job is to look after and maintain the meat suit as long as possible for the spirit to experience. So all of the psychic abilities that we have are possessed. They are signatures of the soul. It's the soul that uses those to maintain the safety of the body as long as possible. And that deals with our wants, our needs, our basic animal instincts are dealt with through the soul. And anything that has lived tends to have a soul. It's interesting when you live close to wild animals that you can see how a newborn has this access to information that is not taught. It's it's something else. It seems to have this connection to this other place, and the soul is no different. It has access to the global consciousness, and Edward Casey would call it the Akashic records. The likes of remote viewing is a trait of the soul. It is a signature of the soul. It can do that. We just project the soul forward. The problem is when you get a soul that becomes unbalanced, that can become problematic, and that really needs adjusting. But the likes of attachments and things like that, they tend to be souls, and they are determined to either latch onto you or worse still to get in, and that's a problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, Sean, can we before we ask the next question, can we kick it to Brendan to put next week's teaser on for next week's show?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Another question going
Because
on?
it's
For decades, people swear they've seen Sasquatch.
Cliff Bergman.
Help me welcome Mr. Russell Accord to
In
the
a
show.
field dominated by men,
Moneymaker.
Melissa Adair stands as a beacon for women of all ages interested in the study of Bigfoot. Founder of Squatch Unlimited, a social media haven for dedicated researchers around the globe. Adair is a
Anything at all
mentor,
Bigfoot.
a trusted resource,
He believes that
and
it's
brand
hoax.
ambassador
Hey
for all
guys, this
things
Dale
Bigfoot.
Wellman comes to us out of
On Mixed from Behind Tall Trees, this Bigfoot chick joins the CARC's Mike Lucci and Chuck Larson to talk about her social media empire, ongoing field research, and much, much more.
the guy had to be ripped like
Wednesday, April 6th, only on CARC Universal.
So
all right.
I have to ask you, what do you think of Bigfoot? Since you've been all around the world and probably been in more squatchy places than I have been, what do you think?
I have Bigfoot's print hanging in my living room.
Do you?
I do.
Awesome.
From where?
That comes from the creek over in California.
Oh, Willow Creek, Bluff Creek.
Bluff Creek, that's it, yeah. It was presented to me by one of the guys there.
Yeah.
And I have it framed and put up on the wall. So
wow.
when the grandchild comes around, I can point up and say, "That's your great granny's foot."
Do you happen to have any of them in Ireland or not? Any reports in Ireland?
We have many cryptids mentioned here in Ireland, but the Bigfoot ones tend to be very. There's not many Bigfoot style ones. We tend to have giant serpents and things that got mentioned, fairies, of course, but again, when you strip it away, you're dealing with the same source. But I've always been fascinated by the Bigfoot, and haven't seen one myself. It was quite a unique experience. But for me to see that, it brings back, in fact, some of the research I'm working on at the minute, in which when a lot of these encounters happen, the likes of UFOs and things like that, a lot of the experiencers tend to be forced into theta, the theta brain rhythm. And that's where a lot of our daydreaming would develop, meditation, deep meditation, but also we also tend to find is that false memory can be planted within theta. So during the initial encounters, people seem to be forced into theta, but as the encounters continue to happen, the body seems to form a resistance. If we don't accept it on face value, there's a type of resistance in which the beta rhythm tends to step forward, and doesn't allow the body to enter theta, and that's high alert. So our body is signaling to us this is not what we think it is. Be alert. And it's an interesting thing that I'm working with at the minute, and I'm following research there from scientists who have had encounters here in Europe, and watching the way that their brain rhythms have altered during the initial sightings.
Wow.
All right. Well, anything else to add, Chuck, by chance?
Hey, you know what? If we want to watch this next Wednesday, we're gonna have we'll be doing the show next Wednesday. And if you ever make it over to the States, you can come out with us and go squatching with us if you want.
You can be sure I would. If I ever make it back to the States, I would love to go Bigfoot hunting, because there are some practices I would like to put into I suppose some practices I'd like to put into practice, let's say, and see how effective that would be during an investigation, and see if we can get some type of action back on that, some type of interaction. I suspect we would, but I would like to put it into practice.
Well, we'd love to have you along. I guarantee you that.
Well, thank you.
We'll sponsor your passport. Let us know.
All right. Well, it's been a fast-paced time. We're about out of time. I want to thank our guest, author investigator Barry Fitzgerald, for coming on with us. A reminder of some of his books. Could you go ahead and post them, Brendan, if you could, please? All right. The Influence, The Council of Three trilogy, In the Mist of Gods, Banshee, Searching the She, Legend Seekers, The Deceptions of Gods and Men, and The Complete Approach, a Scientific Metaphysical. He's also done some documentaries, including Whispers from Stone, Serpents, The Gatekeepers of the Old Knowledge, and The Space Birds Deception, to name a few. They can all be watched on his YouTube channel under his name, Barry Fitzgerald. His website is charmstealer.com, and his books can be purchased on Amazon and also through charmstealer.com. We hope to have him back with us again, because we have plenty more material. We only covered a small portion of really what I had in the outline. So I'd love to have him back. Plus, get some updates on some of the stuff he could, like we asked him a question he couldn't answer. I'd love to get an answer to that in the future. I guarantee that. If you'd like the broadcast, consider helping us out by liking and sharing. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching on Facebook, or by giving a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and sharing on YouTube. Thank you. It will help us out greatly, and whether you watch it now or in the future. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for following us. Our future guest will be on again in 2 weeks, April 14th, when we will have on Nancy Duturtre. She is a skeptical psychic. April 28th, Heather Taddy from Paranormal State and Alien Highway. May 12th, Dave Schrader from the Holster Files and his new podcast, Paranormal 60. May 26th, Katie Burr from Everyday Paranormal and Ghost Lab. The next show for this channel will be actually Jack Carey's Threshold, which will occur Tuesday, at 6 p.m. Eastern. All right, that's about it. Brendan, go ahead and take us out.
Hey, this is Chuck Larson. You're watching the CARC channel on YouTube.
You've been watching Paranormal Files Into the Darkness, a Catskill Appalachian Research Collective production. For more information on this program and others like it, Remember to like, share, and subscribe to CARC Universal today. To join the conversation on our Facebook group, become a member of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective Facebook group. CARC. Relentless.